From Dragon 360, this is Digital Banter, a podcast focused on modern marketing tactics and driving real business results. And now, here are your hosts, James and Zach.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the #1 podcast on Spotify. That's a lie, unfortunately, but it's the #1 in our hearts. It's so good that Andy talked to James and I saying, I need to be back on this. After being on here, I got like 2 followers on LinkedIn. So we said, absolutely, we love to help those in need. And we brought him back in here today. So as always, I'm Zach. Of course, James is with me. And as I stated, we also have Andy back with us, which is great.
More than 2 followers. I got 5.
5. It's increased since the last time we talked. Okay.
I will say our most listened to episode is the one that had Andy so far. So
there's no correlation, though. It's just happened to be that one.
You know what they say about marketing a podcast is that you're supposed to leverage your guest network. So we really leveraged it on that episode.
All 5 of those followers.
Oh, yeah. Crushing it.
That's awesome. Well, again, we're back. We're talking a little bit more high level, but really we're more talking about really where we think digital marketing in a B2B SaaS-oriented place is going to go and how we want to almost change the mold and change direction. If you go back to where we met with Andy, we kind of have this key thing of don't stop innovating, even in this weird time that we're in. Well, so if we're kind of putting those together, really that's what we're going to talk about is how do we make this an actionable item inside of your organization? So really, I'd love to hear first and foremost, James, Andy, where were we?
Yeah, so the big thing that we're seeing that has changed is the full funnel strategy, and that funnel that you've probably seen in every marketing presentation, the AIDA model, awareness, interest, decision, action. It's valuable to some extent, but it doesn't tell the full story. Historically, we've always talked about how do we move our customers through the entire funnel, and the reality is it's not a straight line. And what I think we're going to be diving into today is, okay, so if it's not a straight line, how has it changed?
And I think just to kind of set the stage a little bit more on top of what James is saying is I personally was a huge proponent, and to an extent still am in certain instances, of a full funnel methodology. But the problem with that today is the roadblocks and stumbling blocks it creates for organizations and brands, as well as the agencies that they're partnering with, and really the complexity of the buyer's journey as it relates to looking at that customer journey through the lens of a full funnel. It presents too many barriers, roadblocks, and stumbling blocks that prevent a brand from truly growing and achieving the growth that it should achieve.
Absolutely. If we were to break it down, if we go back to, I believe it was our very first podcast, James, we kind of broke down what does that look like. You got your top of funnel, you got your middle of funnel, and really break it down your bottom of funnel. And really, it's so commonplace. I can't imagine too many people have never heard of this or seen this in some fashion. This has kind of been the bread and butter of everything, even all the way to non-B2B or SaaS-oriented companies. This is something you'll see in almost every aspect. Going back to some of my early career days where we would be doing more localized campaigns, at the end of the day, there's still a funnel aspect, right? Anytime you kind of do this branding play and then you go into something that's a little bit more, hit home, and then you go for the sale, in aspect, that is a funnel. And so, again, it's not just on the B2B SaaS space. So now that we've kind of outlined that, where are we going right? Why doesn't this work anymore? Why are we looking to change something that's been so effective for so long?
I think it comes down to the fact that, like I was saying before, the user journey is not a linear path. And historically, marketers and sales teams have tried our very hardest to be the ones who determined what that path is. So everybody starts at the top of the funnel, moves through middle funnel, all the way down to bottom of funnel close. That was the ideal. And we would, on the sales teams, they would walk their their prospects through a similar process. And on the marketing side, we would try to walk users through the same exact process, like setting up retargeting campaigns that move somebody from one stage of the funnel to the other. And I think what we've really just come to realize is that marketers need to stop being the ones who determine how buyers want to buy, and marketers need to react to how buyers want to buy. Because, I mean, I'll just give some examples specifically in the SaaS space. There's been a history of, oh, well, we're going to have an intro call, and then we are going to walk you through these 8 steps to qualify you before we show you the product. When the reality is, like, sometimes buyers come in, they already know what their problem is, they're just looking for solutions at that point. Like, maybe another brand created that demand and you're just part of the problem set. And I think what we need to do as marketers is embrace how buyers want to buy, stop trying to force them through our system, and let them walk through the system that they need to walk through. And there's a lot that goes into that.
It also comes back to the stumbling blocks, so that I was prefacing is, to your point, James, marketers kind of screwed up the funnel, where they were looking at it through the lens of, oh, what content do we need to create for the middle of the funnel to move somebody from point A to B to C to D, rather than looking more so holistically at what are the true pains and problems of my buyer set and my TAM, my total attainable market, and how do I actively engage with those buyers through my messaging, through content, rather than leading with a content first approach.
Yeah, I think it was like you and I were talking about yesterday, like it goes down to like allowing buyers to buy the way that they want to. Like, what we used to do from the content marketing side of things is when we as marketers would do a content audit, we would take all of the content on the website, social content, paid content, whatever it may be, and then we would map it to each stage of the funnel. And I'll tell you what happened, and every single time that we did that is that we found out that, oh, these brands are missing middle of the funnel content. And I think the reality behind that is like, what is middle of the funnel content? Like, we talk about, where I guess it's in the interest decision phase, and like, what's the content that they need for interest decision rather than the industry level content that everybody likes to read. Because yeah, that middle of funnel content's missing because you're trying to, it's very difficult to create. And the shift is now going to be away from mapping that content to the funnel to mapping that content to what your customers actually care about. Listening to your customers, listening to your sales team. What are the sales materials that help push people over the head? What are the questions that your customers are asking for, opposed to just trying to say, oh, well, we need to beef up our middle of the funnel content because that's going to help bring more people from the top of the funnel to the bottom, when the reality is that's not how it's going to work.
It comes back to content pillars and topics that relate to those pillars that are aligned to pain, challenge, solution, with ultimately engaging those buyers in a more active, proactively and reactive way.
Absolutely. At the end of the day, it comes down to a lot of what we've been saying, right? Typically in the middle of funnel, you're going to have some sort of gated piece, whether that is an ebook, whether that is a white paper, a case study, let's just say even an on-demand webinar that was previously recorded. And so really what you're doing is almost inhibiting this prospect from moving forward. You're making it harder for them to want to, as opposed to doing what they want. Show me the product, right? I kind of want to get to this point here. Andy, you as a CEO, you're probably targeted a shit ton on LinkedIn, purely because of your job title. And it probably follows you and haunts you everywhere on the internet. And so really, as a decision maker on many different tools, what are your top decision-making factors, as well as what is it you truly need to make a decision? Is it an ebook that you have to fill out your information for the third time, or where does it go?
Zach, what if I could tell you that I could drive you 10 new qualified prospects tomorrow?
Ooh.
That's the message I get every single day.
Well,
and guess
can
what?
they?
There's nothing different. There's nothing different with the approach. There's nothing different. It's always collecting a list, sending it out, which is how they're targeting me. So the things that matter to me are this is my problem. This is the solution that you're offering. And this is the differentiating factors behind what makes your offering unique. So to use kind of the jumping off point that I'm talking about with driving 10 new, qualified prospects meet tomorrow, if your process is still using a list building tool like Zoom Info or LinkedIn Sales Navigator, making sure that the list is in line with who my prospects are, and then just hammering them through cold calling and emails. Guess what? I've done that 15 times before. It doesn't work because I'm not actually creating demand. I'm just trying to capture somebody that is hopefully in the mindset of looking at an agency, but in reality, there's no differentiating factors in there because you're limiting yourself to something that is so small, so insignificant, and there's no brand building behind it. So between the differentiators, the USPs, I also care about pricing, right? I want transparent pricing. How much do you cost? And ultimately, what makes you unique and what makes you better than the 15 other things that I've done in the past?
No, that's fantastic. So at any point of this, you didn't read an ebook to make a decision?
No. And in fact, so I was talking to somebody yesterday, somebody that we worked with in the past who moved on to a different position, and she reached out to me with some campaigns that they're looking to launch. And one of those was, hey, looking at it through the lens of, is LinkedIn advertising a better opportunity than this more niche publication and the media kit that that provides? So I was like, okay, let me take a look at the publication, see what the kit offers. And guess what? The kit's behind a form. I'm not going to fill out a form just to get a media kit. I want the transparency of what you do, what kind of advertising you provide, and a run and a rate sheet. That's what I want. And if I have to fill out a form to do that, guess what? You already lost me.
Absolutely. No, I do want to say, poking that question so many times of, did you need an ebook to do this? There's still a time and a place for an ebook. There's still a time and a place for a white paper, an on-demand webinar. And that's when someone's trying to just do more research. And that's really, again, as James has pointed out many, many times, how we utilize these are different than how we used to. Doesn't mean you can't make them. Doesn't mean you can't produce them. There just needs to be a different thought behind them. And it goes right in line with this, right? If ultimately you're trying to create demand, create it. Don't hide it. Don't just go down the path of the typical demand capture aspect. So if we were to kind of look at this, is there a time and place for these older strategies? If so, kind of where, as well as how do we utilize them in today's market and where we're going?
Yeah, so I'll call it traditional lead gen strategy that's focused around webinars, ebooks, all of that kind of stuff. I think it is like a bit of a dated strategy, and at this point, companies should be starting to move away from it. But there is a time and a place and a type of business where it is still a very good fit. And really where I see this the most is in larger enterprise companies, because at this point, like, these large companies, they have a level of brand awareness that I'm talking like billion-dollar companies, multi-$100 million companies, because these companies have built out a sales team of hundreds of people. These sales, they have built up the demand and brand awareness over the time, and they kind of just are part of the solution set already. Think of like the Adobes in the world, the Autodesks in the world. These are brands that have been around forever and have gigantic sales teams. And for that reason, like, if you've already invested all of this money into a large sales team, tons of SDRs, like, the more leads, the better. That is still valid. But those are also organizations that historically have now overinvested in sales and underinvested in marketing. And, those are going to be the most difficult organizations to create change and shift over from traditional full funnel lead gen to more of a demand gen focused strategy. And that's why I think that there is a time and a place for it, because I understand the red tape that goes into making those decisions. And I also understand that some of them are able to close their content. But I think the big thing that those companies need to look at and work on is the idea of like creating content for the sake of like creating something that we can gate. If you are going to be creating content, if you are going to be creating gated content, you need to make sure that that content speaks to what your customers want to hear. Like, it has to be providing them a significant amount of value. If you are just gating your glorified product guide, like, that should just be regular available information.
Yep.
All of the product specs and how to use it and the how-to videos, like, all of that stuff should 100% just be regularly available. But if you do have certain ebook, I'm trying to think, ebooks, case studies, maybe case studies I think can be good because it's more like proprietary information sometimes. You just want to, I don't know, I'm making excuses for companies, but at the end of the day, like, I understand that there is red tape and bureaucracy that can slow that shift over.
So my argument would be, what is the objective of the content? What am I hoping to get out of it? I want somebody to read it. Okay, then why am I going to throw up a barrier to somebody reading it? And then number two, why is the person reading it? Why should they care about that content? What's the true takeaways? What do I want somebody to do after reading it? Because if I'm going to craft an ebook or a white paper, and it's just going to be blocks of text about some study, nobody has the time to read through that.
Yep.
Ain't nobody got the time for that, right? Period. Get to the point, get me to what I need. And to your point too, I agree that case studies are an opportunity to do that because you're showcasing the results and the impacts you have. And if we go back to what I was saying about things that I care about from a decision-making perspective, that's one of those things. I really only see, as I think about this now, a need for true, like, long-form content in the sense of like a PDF is when it comes to what are the differentiators of my product and what does that mean? Because as the buyer, I probably have an influencer, I have a decision maker, and I have a person that's using it. So that collateral is important to share amongst that team, whether it's the buying decision team or the actual users of that. Because at the end of the day, I want to be successful in not just impacting my organization and brand as the buyer and the user ultimately of the software that I am potentially looking at, but on the software sides of things, right, the seller, I want to make sure that the buyer has what they need to make an informed decision and also be a successful customer. That's really what matters at the end of the day, is the content, not just to your point, James, for sakes of content, but what do I want somebody to get out of it? That's the biggest goal there.
I mean, I think you mentioned something about, like, what's the goal of this content, right? And if I'm going to be blunt about it, your goal for gating anything is that's going to turn into an SQL. Like, that should be the level in which you're gating, level of the content in which you're gating. Like, so I see value in gating.
Are you saying you shouldn't gate MQLs? Is that what you're getting at there?
I'm saying that if your content is going to result in an MQL, then it's a waste of time. Like, I think we as marketers, our goal in marketing is, and I've said this before, we want to turn sales teams into order takers. We don't want them to be salespeople. We don't want them to have these long conversations and fly out to Texas to meet with the client and blah, 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 blah. We want them to have all of the information they need, and then when they reach out saying, hey, I'm going to buy this now. I'm just like, because that is more so how buyers buy now. It has, I mean, there's a lot of factors that go into it. Everything's digital. You have a younger market, but I'll just use myself as an example. And with this podcast, like, we've purchased 3 different SaaS products for problems that I realized I had, and purchased all of them on an impulse of less than a day. And not everything is done at that level, but again, I had all the information I need. What we're doing in right now, I was like, oh, it's going to aggregate all of our video files and film up to 4K. The last couple of videos I posted, if you see them, they're all garbage. Like, this is good. Like, I knew what the problem was, and I was just searching out a very specific solution, and I found it. And I didn't have to talk to anybody, and that should be the goal every time.
So I'm going to bring this back home to you guys. So we talk about the funnel as the kickoff here, right?
Yep.
What is the visual of a funnel? A wide mouth to trickle down into a little out, right? In order to actually make the funnel work for you, you have to fill that top of the funnel with a significant amount of quantity just to get 2-3 customers out of it. And that's maybe customers, right? That's probably SQLs. So you think about what is the transitional state if you were to map the funnel to the sales funnel. If the objective of the higher portions of the funnel, let's say top of funnel, is to create a marketing captured or marketing engaged lead, and to ultimately, going back to your point, Zach, flip somebody into an MQL, well, isn't that contrary to what you are actually trying to achieve? right? If you're trying to capture a lead and move them into an MQL status, then in reality, what you want to be doing is to create the awareness and the interest, and therefore the demand within your market. You should not care about what the status of that individual is, because guess what? You can game it through lead scoring, through just getting somebody into the mix, right? And just over flooding a sales team with leads that are never going to buy just for pure numbers sakes. So you could have an SDR that gets handed 100 leads because that's the funnel methodology, and they really only get 1 or 2 out of it, maybe. And that's really assuming that you have quality targeting and quality content that can actually create demand that moves into a capture piece of things. That's really at a crux, one of the core reasons why the funnel is an outdated model.
So this is something that we were talking about yesterday, Andy, but I want to kind of bring this into like an example that we see all the time when it comes to ABM and ABM strategy. Traditionally, what I feel like ABM is built based off of conflict between sales and marketing. Marketing wants us to, or sales basically wants marketing to do more stuff that supports them. So they said, here's our target accounts, like nurture them with information so that we can more effectively reach out to them. And then what marketing historically has done is said, hey, we're going to take those leads and we're going to move them through the funnel with different messaging. And this is where I think that you're taking a list of buyer or potential customers who don't want to buy. That's why they're on an ABM list, because they haven't been pushed over. You want to create demand within those, but then you're just serving them top of funnel content. And I don't know, I just feel like that, like this is a prime example of marketers and sales trying to force users down a specific customer journey. And again, it's one of those things that we really need to move away from.
How many times either of you? How many times either of you have been stuck in one of these funnel systems, and it's almost like they're pushing it down your throat? How many times have you actually bought? Can you think of any?
Rare.
Off the top of my head, I can't think of one.
My only hesitation in answering is if I'm getting discounts or something like that, because I'm kind of trying to be nurtured through an abandonment funnel.
That's a valid point.
But that goes back to gaming the system. You're only able to move somebody forward by lowering your margins through a discount. And it doesn't work. At that point, you have the brand. Then
at that point, you haven't proved your value. That's the whole. Like if you're looking for a discount, it means that they haven't shown their value to you.
Right, and that's not just for the e-commerce space. That goes for B2B, tech tools, things like that. Like give me the first 2 months off. I have a 12-month contract just as that discount. So that's not a pure e-commerce only consumer side problem. That's global. That's all businesses.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like most things that I purchased, the product sells itself. That's why product marketing is so important and product development is so important, because that's what makes or breaks companies at the end of the day.
So we talk about ABM, right? ABM is just a reverse funnel when you look at it visually, at least historically, right? Demand gen, wide mouth, narrow bottom. ABM, wide bottom, narrow top. As the number of accounts decreases when you move up the pyramid, your personalization should increase. Whereas the bottom is a wider set of accounts that you haven't necessarily engaged enough to trigger an intent or a next step to be moved on. In reality, it should be the complete opposite. And really, no funnel should exist because, to your point, James, ABM should operate not in a silo where field sales, field marketers, and sales are kind of dictating, oh, these are our target accounts. Well, why are they your target accounts? In reality, the entire business should be operating under the same ICP.
Yep.
Like what makes your account set different than the rest of the market? And I think that goes a long way in saying that demand creation and ABM have to be operating under the same umbrella, because ABM is just a tactic that lives under that demand creation objective and strategy. It's just a specific set of accounts that you believe offer greater revenue or greater opportunity through a set of account intelligence that you hopefully have. If you don't have that, then there's no reason to run ABM, because you have nothing that differentiates why I'm going to split out this account or this set of accounts separately from the rest of my demand gen efforts. So you have to have the intelligence. You have to go back to what we talked about kind of last time I was on: data, clean data, and information that informs your decision making. Because if you don't have that, what's the point of running an ABM strategy that is different or more unique than your overall demand creation perspective?
Yep. No, and that's where I think the biggest flaw in ABM strategies is just like that. Again, I'm going to go back to the pyramid. You have one to many, one to few, one to one. And this like one to many approach, general brand cover, like I feel like that is just a huge, like if you're doing pure brand cover campaigns across all of your target accounts, like that defeats the whole purpose of ABM, because the whole purpose of ABM, like you said, is like, you know something about these customers. You either know their industry, they have a specific problem set that your product is more likely to solve, something specific about them. So you have to speak specifically to them. If you're, running a, logo, tagline, display campaign across all of your target accounts just so you can like trick users into visiting your website and trick them in your lead scoring system, like that, it's just a waste. Where like I do think there's a ton of value in the one to few messaging and one to one messaging, because what you're trying to do there is have more of a direct conversation with a potential customer. And I mean, that goes back into the whole, shift away from full funnel to demand gen. Demand gen is much more so focused on listening to your customers through qualitative insights, seeing what they're doing, seeing what they care about, and serving them messages that speak to what they care about, versus a marketing team coming up with our top funnel content, middle funnel, bottom, and then forcing everybody through it.
But there is a validation for one to many if you're looking at it from a vertical marketing perspective. If you serve multiple markets from a vertical perspective, they likely have more unique pains and challenges, and your solution may serve 75% of your total market, but it might solve those pains and challenges in a much more unique way, and therefore the messaging that you can present to those verticals within the larger ICP set of demand is going to probably net you a little bit stronger results as far as pushing somebody up the hill, so to speak, to reach that apex of acting to decide on solving their problems, not just overall, but especially with your brand as the solution provider to those problems.
Yeah, that's completely fair. I think on my side, I just have not seen that. What I feel like what I typically see is, here are all of our target accounts, where
Yep.
like they start doing the one to few at the industry level, or it's almost
Right.
like you're taking the funnel or pyramid or whatever you want to call it and bumping it down a rung than what clients typically come to us with.
Right, but here's why. If you think about it, right, where is ABM originating from? It's not originating from marketing. It's originating from sales. Sales has a different mentality of trying to force somebody through to becoming a customer versus marketing, which should have a different mentality around creating, capturing, and nurturing somebody across the customer journey. It's different mindsets, and the originating sources there of ABM versus demand creation is a huge factor that results in the success of that. That's what I'm saying. They have to be merged and live under one umbrella, rather than not just disparate systems and strategies, but ultimately stakeholders. Everybody should be at the same table: customers, marketing, sales, product, and customer success. If you have a round table of individuals from each of those departments, I guarantee you're going to have a much stronger message, a much stronger product, and much stronger customers that are going to create a much stronger LTV for your brand at the end of the day.
Absolutely. So I feel like we've kind of gone over everything in regards to why we're moving away from this direction. So now let's talk about our directional move and why we're kind of suggesting this, right? So how do we solve this user journey that's no longer linear?
Yeah, it all comes down to listening to your customers and letting buyers buy letting them buy on their terms. We talk a lot about demand gen versus demand capture, and I think that the what this model sets up in a much more effective way than the full funnel model is the fact that demand generation can happen in a million different ways. And it doesn't, everybody enters at the funnel at a different place. Everybody's role in the decision-making process is different. And what you should be building in your content is stuff that speaks to the feedback that you're getting from your customer. Like what you're going to drive demand by listening to your customers and developing content that gets them everything that they need to know up until they decide that they need to make a decision. And then once they've decided that they may need to make a decision, it's essentially all downhill from there, because you helped them they figure out that they had a problem, you helped craft the solution to the problem, and now they're just looking at different solution sets. And again, it's about giving them all the information they need when it comes to pricing, product information, contract details. I mean, basically everything that you can give up front, so you get to the point where your sales team is just an order taker. It's what you're doing in this type of strategy is you are putting a lot of the work that used to be on sales teams in the hands of the marketing team. And what that allows you to do is it allows you to do sales at scale versus building out these giant sales teams. And, it just kind of, I think that when you have these large sales teams and they're wasting a lot of time, and this is going to allow your salespeople to be much more efficient.
Want the easiest way to think about this, right? So forget the visual of a wide mouth funnel and think about the 3 or 4 phases as being equal widths, right? So take quantity out of the equation, focus on quality. That's what making them all the same width does visually and conceptually. Now flip it on its side. Rather than looking at a vertical, look at a portrait, okay? So you have a sideways funnel in that regard. Now think about what you're trying to achieve at each stage of the funnel historically in the old school full funnel methodology. On the left-hand side of that, you want to create awareness and interest, right? If you go back to what I'm talking about before, getting somebody up the hill, right? Those are what those 2 phases are meant to do. You're trying to move somebody up the hill on the left side of the funnel, right? And ultimately, with decision being that mid-stage historically and conceptually, that's that apex. That's the apex of the hill that you want to push somebody over and get them to act, which is the bottom, or in this case, the right side of that mountain, right? If you can do that, that's what puts them in a much stronger position as a buyer to be converted into a customer by the sales team. So again, just think about if you're in this full funnel methodology kind of conundrum, if you just take that as kind of a visual cue and start to think about how do I change what I'm looking at conceptually, but also goal-orientedly, it's going to make a lot more sense and help you kind of overcome that, oh, I need to fill the top of the funnel just to get a few people to spit out the bottom.
Absolutely. I think one of the things that, I really want to focus on, that I want us to talk about here is like, what are some of the actionable next steps that brands can take to move from a full funnel strategy to something that is a more demand gen focus? Andy, on your end, like, what do you recommend the first steps be?
Sitting down and really understanding why your customers bought from you and why they're still with you today. You have to create a feedback loop. You have to engage your customers because they are the ones that went through the process to ultimately buy from you. And what are the true unique selling points that got them to make that decision? And what are the competitors that they were looking at in their research phase? Because chances are the USPs that drove them to buy and the competitors that they considered part of the buying process are completely different than what sales is telling you and what marketing is putting out there from a messaging perspective. You need to validate what your USPs are and let that inform marketing, sales, and also product, because product is important, at least in this time, especially for reducing churn of customers that are no longer finding value in what they bought from originally. So it has to start there, and that creates the loop that then informs the pivots that you need to make from a marketing messaging perspective, a content creation perspective, and ultimately a sales conversation aspect of the conversations that will focus more so on identifying pains, challenges, tech stack that is being evaluated, and the solutions that you and the rest of your customers have found such value in as it relates to creating that lifetime customer value.
Yeah, great summary there. I think on my end, the main thing is like finding out, I think you summed it up in many more intelligent words, but finding out how your buyers want to buy.
Shocker.
But seriously, like it's about finding out how your buyers want to buy and what information that they need to make a decision, and then giving them that information. And then the things to stop doing is trying to trick them into giving you their information so that your sales team can reach out to them. Again, our goal in anything is to drive sales quality leads that close. You know, we don't want to drive contacts. There's a huge difference between a contact and a sales ready lead. And, you know, contacts in this day and age, I feel like just don't get you as far as they used to.
Well, I think you bring up a good point too, right? So where are your prospective buyers receiving or seeking that information? And I'm not just talking from like a channel or a tactical perspective, but really who are they relying on or looking to inform them of what solutions exist out there that solve their problems, whether or not the individual that they're trying to talk to went through a similar process or is just in a similar role and vertical. It comes back to word of mouth, something that was and still is a key component to any marketing. Think about back in the 50s, right? Door-to-door marketing. If Maud next door bought a Hoover vacuum and the guy was coming over to you, you want to probably buy a Hoover vacuum because Maud just kind of bit the bullet and is going to make her household much cleaner because of that Hoover. Same thing exists in today's world of buying, just in a digitized format. Think about the one-on-ones or the recommendations, the conversations that you have with others in the industry. Hey, I went through this myself. This is the process that I went through to solving that problem. These are the competitors that I went to and got the information from. And as the prospective buyer, right, I'm going to ask that person, hey, do you still have that information? Or can you give me those notes? Cut down the buying time and get me to the point of solution for my problem in a much faster way than kind of moving through the funnel of getting spoon-fed this content that actually doesn't get me to the end point of solving my problem. It all comes back to word of mouth and peer reviews, peer recommendations, things like that drive the needle to accelerating opportunities and pipeline.
Yeah, and I think the great thing about how things have shifted from the 30s or whatever, word of mouth has been around forever, but the great things about now in the digital age with social is that, you know, you are able to pull those qualitative insights from these different user groups. I mean, I encourage sales teams, marketing teams to like I don't want to say be part of the conversation because you don't want to intrude on private conversations, but I mean, certainly there is enough out there where you're going to be able to see what people are saying about you. I mean, go through Reddit and see what problem solutions people are talking about. Go through private or some of the LinkedIn groups that are out there. You know, you're not going to get all of the nitty gritty details because usually those are held for more private conversation, dark social conversations. But I mean, there's enough information publicly available that you can at least inform your strategy and at least do the due diligence, the research to figure out what those pain points are, rather than, I feel like that's rather than doing a survey to your customers. Like sure, surveys are great and you can get some valuable information, but it's just another data point that you can steal from.
Take care of your customers and they'll take care of you.
100%.
Right? The other thing that I think is important that people need to be careful of is trying to create a review system or whatever you want to call it that buyers can easily see being gamed. For example, move outside of the B2B space for a second, but if you just go to Google, right, and you start looking through reviews, or Yelp even, you can pretty much tell what's being gamed and what is completely irrelevant to the decision that you're trying to make. Because of whether the consumers just got pissed off about something that's completely irrelevant to the product, politics, things like that, who knows. But in a more B2B sense, buyers are smart. They know that Gartner studies, Forrester studies, they're paid for. They're not just this true objective third-party commission study, or study in general, I should say, that exists out there. They know it's commissioned on behalf of a brand. That's how those brands exist. They make money by getting commissioned studies created on behalf of brands. Doesn't mean that the data is wrong in there, but just conceptually, buyers are smart. They're smarter today than they were yesterday, and they know that those third-party, supposedly objective content creators can be gamed. So I think it's important that when we talk about word of mouth, reviews, testimonials, and kind of the consolidation of that information into a single piece of content in this realm, that you don't go back and revert to, oh, well, we need to do a Gartner study, we need to do a Forrester study. No, because that's not going to actually create more demand. It's not going to move somebody over the hump of acting to decide because of buyers being smart.
And Zach, that goes back to what you and I have talked about just like the transition of what the purpose of your website is.
Yep.
Right? Because, I mean, our buyers are smart enough to realize that a Gartner study is a load of BS. Like, let's be honest, they certainly know that the content on your website is biased. And, you need to make sure that you take that into consideration with the content that you're putting out there. And that's where, like, some things that aren't biased are what your pricing is, how your billing model is, like a demo video of your software. Like, this is exactly how it works. Like, I don't know, your little checkbox diagram of how you set up around your competitors. It's not, I mean, you and I have talked about this too. You can be very honest with that and it comes off as more authentic, but at the same time, everybody's going to read right through that. And your blog content that says why you're the best XYZ software, also buyers see right through that. That's why it's, again, listen to them and then serve them the content that they actually want to see.
Absolutely.
Right. It comes back to who are your truly trusted sources of information that have the least amount of bias.
So, in essence, we're trying to almost restructure really just how people market. And that's what a lot of this conversation, a lot of the tips and tools we've been talking about is. But how does someone make a full-fledged switch from a full funnel system? You can't just stop what you're doing, right? There's got to be a tactful way to make it happen. It's like we always say, easier said than done. It's not as easy as just flipping a switch, let's say on LinkedIn or Facebook. Let's just say this, Andy, you're currently running a full funnel system for your company. How do you approach it to a point where we move to this direction? What are the key things we need to do right off the bat? And what can be something that we work towards?
I mean, I'm going to ask up front, as I would ask you guys, for any strategies that we are operating on clients. How are we creating demand? How are we capturing demand? Chances are the capture side of things is a lot easier to understand and evaluate. But on the creation side, it comes back to what is our content, not just what is resonating, but really how good is our content in speaking to our customers or prospective buyers, right? Mm-hmm. How are we creating how are we creating demand? Like it's all wrapped up in that question. And if we can't answer that effectively, chances are we're not doing a good job. So we need to not burn it down, but look at what is resonating, create that loop, but also create quick wins that you're not just creating roadblocks and stumbling blocks for you to delay the launch of a product or delay the launch of this shift. Make it incremental, make it just one step at a time. Easiest step you can do today is what content does not need to be gated. What can you remove a form from? And just see what that does to the engagement itself on that piece of content. If you're converting at 7% today and you have a really strong targeting within your promotional distribution of that content, what's that other 93% represent to you, right? 93% loss just because you have a form in front of it. Remove the form. Just see what happens. Does that content get downloaded if it's a PDF? Does it get watched more? And just see what the impact is from that. And how can you kind of expound upon that by looking at what are those content pillars, the topics, and the types of content that are resonating, engaging most. If you remove a form from one piece of content, great. Do it to another. Measure them back and forth, especially if they are trying to achieve the same objective of creating awareness, interest, and creating demand on the left-hand side of that curve. They all have the same objective. They may just be structured a little bit differently. So use that test and learn methodology to figure out what's going to engage the audience more. And just keep testing and learning from there. Remove another form, test out a different message. All the while you're creating that feedback loop with customers that inform and validate whether you're pushing the right USPs, whether you're pushing the right feature sets, and whether you're targeting the right competitors in your comparison language.
I think the biggest thing is you have to, like, as far as like making this transition happen, is like you need to be willing to change. You need to be willing to change where you invest money and how you measure results, because those are the two biggest fundamental issues with how the system is built right now. Start with how you invest. A lot of companies are super focused on bottom of the funnel metrics. The question that we always get, and this is, I'm going to take one step back here. Marketing teams and sales teams are always set up based on targets, right? There's target revenue numbers, target lead numbers, target MQL numbers, etc. And where the majority of conversations around marketing strategies happen from are what those numbers are and what we need to do to achieve those numbers. If we're not hitting those numbers, the conversation quickly transitions to, well, what quick wins can we get to get there? And really what quick wins always result in is bottom of the funnel demand capture activities. What keywords can we do on search that we're not doing? Whatever. And all of these issues are built from there's not enough demand, like you haven't built enough demand to capture it with what you're doing right now. So a lot of times those quick wins to meet those typically unrealistic goals, it doesn't work because you're so focused on a short-term strategy. So the shift from lead gen to demand gen, I'll call, is step one. You're going to shift from a short-term strategy to a long-term strategy, because your whole strategy is about, instead of trying to like capture leads, it's about creating value and creating demand. So with that, now I'm going to go into talk more about the investment piece. Is you need to stop investing as much in paid search, retargeting, and trying to make those work for your entire media strategy. You need to be running top of funnel prospecting campaigns. Goal is to gain net new customers. Mm-hmm. And there's not enough of a focus on gaining net new customers. I feel like us as marketers, we always fall back on how do we do upsells, cross-sells, whatever. And the only reason we do that is because it's very difficult to gain new customers. But that's where the majority of the focus is, because once you get a customer, the cost of retaining that customer is far less expensive. So shift investing from, it's a very long-winded way of saying this, but shift your investing from these demand capture activities to more demand gen educational activities. It's step one. Are you going to see immediate results? No, absolutely not. But long-term, you are going to grow far faster. And then the measurement of that is also completely different. Like, you need to get away from your lead scoring system. You need to stop optimizing for MQLs. Like, the whole measurement is looking at total sales lift, total pipeline velocity, metrics that actually matter to a sales team, not targets that are arbitrary numbers set up by marketing leaders. And there's a whole shift that happens there on the measurement side too.
I find it funny that founders and business leaders understand that the way to grow a brand takes time, investment, and dedication, except when it comes to marketing. Then it's all about cost and the cost of acquiring a customer, right? Well, really acquiring a lead that then you flip into a customer. They lose sight of those three core fundamentals that help them even create the business in the first place or lead the business, right? The time it took to acquire your first customer that wasn't a friend or family member, the investment required of not just time and money to developing what you sell, but getting the business off the ground, and the dedication both professionally and personally to making the brand what it is today. They lose sight of all that because of the cost and the misnomer of what marketing has historically been focused on, right? They need to be able to understand that creation of demand and true achievable growth for a brand, both in marketing senses and business senses, takes time, dedication, and investment.
It's funny, I feel like we've come full circle in the realm of marketing, media, and advertising, and it's all because of attribution and measurement. Like, that's the whole reason. I mean, they used to throw millions of dollars on television ads and run like sales lift studies to see like how it affected sales, right? Because there was no attribution to the newspaper, no attribution. Then attribution came out, and you were able to measure a lot of things, and it was great. It was fantastic. And now, honestly, measurement is going away a little bit with all of the privacy things that are happening now. And we're coming full circle back to the strategies that we used to do a long time ago, except for now I think we're being much more strategic and deliberate about it versus, hey, here's like a bunch of Budweiser frogs like drinking a beer. It's now diving a lot deeper into the select problem sets. I'll say it's a shift from brand advertising to bottom of the funnel demand capture advertising to now demand gen again.
But think about if you went back to those three core principles: time, investment, dedication. If the reason you created your business was not just to solve a problem, but to ultimately sell the business or exit it, because really as a founder or kind of a higher up leader, that's really your end game, is to make a shit ton of money through one of those exit strategies. Obviously, unless you're a family business, but even still, like, your objective is still to probably make a shit ton of money. Investing in the growth of the brand is going to have a greater impact on the valuation of the company to enable you to successfully exit in the greatest amount of money that you can achieve than just focusing on capturing demand through bottom of funnel activities that does not create net new customers, does not create net new revenue, and does not increase valuation to the level that it could achieve.
Absolutely. Well, this has been, I think, kind of enlightening on really how we go about it. Again, we spoke to more of the traditional models here of what is the funnel and why we shouldn't kind of go down that path, and how we're almost flipping it on its own head and saying, hey, here's everything you have been doing. Stop it. We're going to move towards this direction. And we're not asking you to, again, reinvent the wheel. A lot of what we've been talking about is all around the same concepts, just different pieces of it, and how you can bring this into your organization, get everyone on board. I think a key piece that you were kind of alluding to is, the founder or owners or co-founders, whoever, stakeholders, they're clearly in this business for a reason. Now, I think, James, we were talking about this. The value props or the USPs from these founders, go ask your marketing team, are they going to line up with why you originally went into business? And I think that will be one of the most enlightening conversations you may have. And I'm not going to say I blame you. As an owner, you have so many things going on. Odds are, if you're a growing business and you're exploding, let's say you just, got funding or something like that, right? Yeah, you're probably pretty far removed from the exact messaging that's being portrayed. Likewise, I challenge you to talk to your sales team. How are they pitching your brand? Or how are they pitching your software? I bet it's not the same of what you originally went into business with. I bet it's not the pitch that you made to get partners. I bet it's vastly different. Maybe in a good way on certain aspects, and in other ways, maybe it's what you were actually trying to avoid because it's become cookie cutter and you were trying to disrupt the model, right? Why else go into business? And so aligning with all parts of the team will also make this easier. There are certain things in marketing, you can't erase, especially in messaging, purely to stay competitive, to stay relevant, whatever it may be, as well as some of the things you might want to say may not just be possible because of different aspects of what's allowed to be put out there. But in the end, aligning all members of the team is going to make this new, what we call strategy, an easier go-to-market, right? Specifically for your brand.
Want to save time and money? Get product, customer success, maybe a customer advisory board, marketing, sales, and leadership at the same table. Go round table and say, what makes us different? What are our USPs? And then basically take a whiteboard and say, these are the ones that are actually common among all 5 or 6 members, especially the customer set. And these are the ones that are not. And guess what? Those that have, let's say, green dots, those are the ones that we need to be focusing on as we move forward, especially on the product development side of things, because these are the features that people are looking for. These are the features that we need to enhance. And these are the features that are truly solving expensive pains for our customers and new customers that we are trying to acquire.
Absolutely.
The old green dot exercise. Let's end it with that, Zach.
The old green dot exercise. No. Again, thank you so much, Andy, for joining us. I know this was a little bit more of a, I would argue, more fun conversation than talking about a recession. So hats off for making it back on here. Glad you could come back. But ultimately, again, we hope this is all helpful. Everything we're trying to do is really to almost simplify, and I probably shouldn't use that word, but simplify your strategies and really align yourself with how to stay relevant in this evolving market, in a market that's always changing. It's very hard to always be up to date. And so that's what we try and do. We're trying to make life easier. Again, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks for listening to Digital Banter. If you enjoyed today's episode, please be sure to like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. New episodes are uploaded every Friday. In the meantime, keep up with the show by following James and Zach on social media. Links are in the show notes.